I should have died that night. But instead, he showed up smirking like the devil himself, and suddenly I wasn't sure if I had been saved or just dragged into a deeper kind of hell. Ethan Callahan had always been the name whispered in dark alleys, a shadow lurking behind small-town scandals. I had seen him once in high school standing against the lockers with that reckless grin that made teachers sigh and girls blush, but he was nothing to me. Just another rumor in a town where rumors grew like weeds. Until that night, when I was drowning in my own chaos, and he pulled me out with nothing more than his hand and his maddeningly steady eyes. I was 20 then, old enough to know better, too young to stop myself from believing in miracles. And Ethan wasn't a miracle. He was a storm. The first time he touched me, it wasn't romantic. It was survival. His fingers dug into my arm as he yanked me off the bridge railing, the city's cold night air whipping past us, my chest heaving with the taste of salt and regret. "What the hell are you doing?" His voice was sharp, not kind, not the gentle tone I thought a savior might use. I stared at him, shocked, breathless, caught between anger and shame. "Let me go." He didn't. His grip only tightened, eyes burning into mine. "Not happening." And just like that, everything changed. Ethan wasn't the type of boy you brought home to meet your mother. He smelled like cigarettes and bad decisions, carried himself like he owned every street corner, every shadow. But he also had this way of looking at me as if I was something fragile and dangerous all at once, that left me trembling in places I didn't want to admit. His rescue didn't end at the bridge. Somehow, it stretched into days, weeks. He appeared when I least expected him, lingering at the edges of my life. Sometimes he was my tormentor, mocking me with that crooked grin. Other times, he was my anchor, grounding me when I wanted to float away into oblivion. And I hated him for it. And I needed him for it. The truth is, I had been lost long before Ethan came crashing into my world. My father was gone vanished when I was 13, leaving behind nothing but an empty chair at the dinner table and a silence my mother filled with tears. My mother tried. God, she tried. But grief broke her bones. And by the time I hit high school, she was a ghost drifting through our house. So I became invisible too. A boy with hollow smiles and restless hands, working shifts at the diner, studying just enough to keep the teachers off my back, pretending that loneliness didn't taste like poison in my throat. That's the boy Ethan pulled back from the edge. And he didn't even ask me why I was there, ready to disappear into the dark. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he saw it in my eyes, the same kind of broken he carried inside. One night, weeks after the bridge, we sat on the hood of his beat-up car in the empty parking lot of the 24-hour grocery store. The world around us smelled like gasoline and midnight rain. "You think you're the only one who's drowning?" Ethan asked suddenly, tossing a half-empty beer bottle from hand to hand. I looked at him, startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" He laughed, bitter and low. "It means you're not special, Liam. Everyone's got ghosts." My chest tightened at the way he said my name, like he owned it. I wanted to argue, to snap back, but instead I just stared at him. And for a second, in the dim glow of the parking lot lights, I saw its shadow behind his smirk, the hurt he hid under layers of bravado. That's when I realized something terrifying. Maybe Ethan hadn't saved me. Maybe we were saving each other. Still, nothing about him was easy. He was fire, unpredictable and consuming. One minute he'd push me away, laughing like none of this mattered, like I was just some stupid kid who needed babysitting. The next, he'd be leaning too close, his breath warm against my ear, eyes flicking to my lips before he turned away. I hated how much I wanted him. I hated that every time he brushed past me, my skin burned. I hated that I couldn't stop thinking about him, even when I knew he was dangerous. And yet, I craved it. The way he made me feel alive, even if it hurt. The turning point came on a night when the city felt colder than usual. We were walking side by side, our steps echoing down the empty street. And I asked the question I had been too afraid to say out loud. Why did you stop me that night? Ethan froze, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, his jaw tightening. After a long silence, he whispered, "Because I know what it's like to want to jump." The words knocked the air out of me. For the first time, I saw him, not the reckless boy with the leather jacket and the devil's grin, but the broken kid underneath. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to tell him he wasn't alone. But before I could, he looked at me with that dangerous softness in his eyes and said, "Don't make me regret it, Liam." And then he walked away, leaving me standing in the dark with my heart racing. That night I understood, Ethan Callahan wasn't a hero. He wasn't a savior. He was a boy with scars deeper than mine, who had chosen just on Cedo pull someone else back from the edge. But maybe, just maybe, that was enough. And as I watched him disappear into the night, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of our story. That's the beginning of something raw, messy, and beautiful. And I wasn't ready to let go. I should have walked away. Every instinct told me to. But instead, I kept showing up where Ethan was, like a moth circling a flame that would eventually burn it to ash. The strange thing was, Ethan never told me to leave. Not really. He'd tease, push, roll his eyes. But he never said the words that could have freed me, go. And I couldn't. It was late autumn in our small town. The kind of place where the chill clung to your bones and the trees shed their leaves like secrets. I was still working shifts at the diner. Still dragging myself to classes I barely cared about. Still pretending at home that my mother and I weren't slowly drifting into two separate worlds. But there was Ethan now. And that changed everything. Sometimes he'd wait outside the diner, leaning against his car with that smug grin. Sometimes he'd show up at my college campus, cutting through the crowd like he owned it. We'd drive around aimlessly, music too loud, words too sharp, laughter bubbling up where there should have been silence. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that he'd get bored of me, or I'd get tired of the chaos. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was hooked. One night, after a long shift, I found him leaning against the brick wall of the diner, cigarette glowing in the dark. "You know," I muttered, shoving my hands into my hoodie pocket. "People are starting to think you're stalking me." He smirked, taking a drag. "Maybe I am." The words made my stomach twist. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice cracked. "That's not funny." I wasn't joking. His eyes glittered in the dim light, unreadable. Then, as if he realized he'd said too much, he flicked the cigarette to the ground and crushed it beneath his boot. "Come on. Let's drive." I should have said no. Instead, I followed him. We ended up at the cliffs outside town, where the world stretched wide and the ocean swallowed the horizon. Ethan sat on the edge, legs dangling carelessly over the drop, like gravity was just a suggestion. "Don't you ever get scared?" I asked, sitting beside him, keeping my distance. He chuckled. "Of falling? No. Of living. Every damn day." The honesty in his voice startled me. I turned to look at him, and for once, he wasn't hiding behind a smirk. His profile was sharp against the night sky, eyes distant, haunted. "Why do you do this?" I whispered. "Why pull me back that night? Why keep showing up?" Ethan glanced at me, something flickering in his gaze. "Because you remind me what it feels like to want more than nothing." My chest tightened, my throat dry. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled inside me. Instead, I let the silence stretch, the sound of waves crashing below filling the air. Then his hand brushed against mine. Barely there. A whisper of contact. But it was enough to send a jolt through me. Enough to make me forget how to breathe. I didn't move away. And neither did he. Of course. It wasn't all quiet confessions and stolen moments. With Ethan, there was always fire-sharp words. Reckless choices. The constant tug-of-war between us. Like the time he dragged me into a fight I never asked for. We were at a gas station late one night, grabbing cheap snacks, when some older guys started mouthing off, calling him names, taunting him about debts he supposedly owed. I tried to pull him away, but Ethan being Ethan, he swung first. The fight was messy, brutal, and over in minutes. By the time the cops showed up, we were gone. Ethan's knuckles bloody, my heart racing like it wanted to escape my chest. In the car afterward, I snapped. What the hell was that? You could have gotten us arrested. He wiped the blood on his jeans, smirking like it was nothing. Relax, pretty boy. You're safe with me. Safe. I exploded. That was the opposite of safe. You can't just... But my voice broke, the anger melting into something softer, scarier. You can't keep doing this to yourself. Ethan went quiet. His smirk faded. For a second, he looked like the boy I saw on the cliffs, vulnerable. Then he leaned closer, so close I could feel his breath on my lips. Maybe I just need someone to stop me. The air between us buzzed, heavy with everything we weren't saying. I wanted to close the distance, to finally cross that invisible line. But I froze. And Ethan, with a crooked grin that didn't reach his eyes, started the car. The push and pull between us was maddening. Some nights, I swore I hated him. Other nights, I couldn't imagine breathing without him. And then came the night everything cracked open. It was raining. A relentless downpour that soaked through clothes and bones. Ethan showed up at my house, banging on the door until I opened it. He was drenched, trembling, his eyes wild. I need to stay here, he said, voice rough. I didn't ask why. I just let him in. We sat in silence on my bedroom floor, the storm raging outside. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. But the lighter wouldn't catch. After the third try, he threw it across the room, cursing. Ethan, I whispered, reaching out. Talk to me. He looked at me then, eyes glassy, and for the first time since I met him, I saw tears. I can't keep doing this. He choked out. I can't keep being this. Without thinking, I pulled him into my arms. He resisted for a heartbeat, then collapsed against me, his forehead pressing into my shoulder, his body shaking with silent sobs. I held him like he was breaking apart in my arms, because maybe he was. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just falling for Ethan Callahan. I already had. The storm outside eventually softened, but the one inside me only grew stronger. Because loving Ethan meant stepping into his darkness. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to survive it. Morning came heavy. The storm had passed. But Ethan was still asleep on the floor of my bedroom, his head resting near my knee, his breathing uneven. I sat there, watching him like an idiot, trying to memorize the way the early sunlight softened his sharp edges. He looked so different like this. Vulnerable. Almost innocent. Nothing like the reckless boy who laughed in the face of danger. I wanted to reach out, to brush the damp hair from his forehead. But I stopped myself. Touch was dangerous with Ethan. Too much. Too soon. And he'd vanish, throwing up walls so high I'd never climb them again. Still, I whispered softly, "You don't have to keep running." He stirred but didn't wake. And maybe that was for the best. When he finally did wake up, it was like flipping a switch. The softness I'd seen was gone, replaced with his usual smirk. "Sleep well, pretty boy," he teased, stretching his arms with deliberate carelessness. I rolled my eyes, trying to hide the ache in my chest. "You kept kicking me in your sleep." "Guess I was dreaming about fighting." He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. That was Ethan, always two people at once. The boy who let me hold him through the night, and the boy who mocked me in the morning as if nothing had happened. Life with Ethan was like standing in the eye of a storm. Calm one moment, chaos the next. He started showing up more often at the diner, at my campus, even at my house. My mom noticed, of course. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice gentle but firm. "Liam, who is this boy?" I froze. "Just a friend." Her eyes softened with sadness I couldn't bear. "He doesn't look like just a friend." Heat rushed to my face. "It's complicated." She reached out, touched my hand. "Then be careful. Some people carry storms inside them. And if you're not strong enough, they can pull you under." I didn't tell her that I was already drowning. The cracks started to show. One night, Ethan disappeared for 3 days. No calls. No texts. Nothing. I told myself I didn't care, that I was done waiting for him. But the truth was, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except the hollow space he left behind. When he finally showed up, bruised and battered, my anger boiled over. "Where the hell were you?" I shouted, shoving him as he leaned against my front porch. He winced but didn't fight back. "Had some things to take care of." "Things? You vanish for 3 days and that's all you have to say." His silence was louder than any excuse. I grabbed his jacket, forcing him to look at me. "You can't keep doing this, Ethan. You can't just disappear and... Why do you care?" He snapped, his voice raw. "I'm not your responsibility, Liam." The words cut deep, but I didn't let go. "Then why the hell did you save me? Why do you keep coming back if none of this matters?" For a moment, I thought he'd hit me. His jaw clenched, eyes blazing. But then, softer than I expected, he whispered, "Because you're the only thing that feels real." The fight drained out of me in an instant. My hands trembled as I let go of his jacket. And for the first time, Ethan didn't run. He stayed. Later that night, as we sat on the porch steps, the silence between us heavy, he finally told me a piece of the truth. "My dad used to hit me," he said flatly, eyes fixed on the dark street. "Guess it was easier than talking." I didn't know what to say. My chest ached, my throat tight. Ethan smirked, but it was hollow. "Don't look at me like that. I'm not some charity case. I got out. That's all that matters." But I couldn't stop looking at him, couldn't stop wanting to reach out. Instead, I whispered, "You didn't deserve that." For once, he didn't argue. Days blurred into weeks, and slowly, something shifted between us. It wasn't a confession, not in words. It was in the way he'd linger a little longer when we said goodbye. The way his shoulder brushed against mine when we walked. The way his laughter softened when it was just the two of us. It was in the way he started showing up not just in chaos, but in the quiet moments too, helping me carry groceries, sitting with me while I studied, even cooking with my mom once, though he burned half the food. It was in the way he let me see the boy underneath the armor, piece by fragile piece. And then it happened. We were in his car, parked on a hill overlooking the town. Music low on the radio. He was teasing me about something me terrible singing. Maybe when I snapped back, laughing despite myself. The laughter faded, leaving us in silence. Our eyes locked. He leaned in first, hesitant, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't fireworks or explosions. It was something deeper, quieter. Promise. I kissed him back, hands trembling, heart racing. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, he whispered, almost in disbelief, "You have no idea how long I've wanted that." I smiled, tears burning my eyes. Maybe I do. But love doesn't erase the past. As much as I wanted to believe that kiss changed everything, the shadows still clung to Ethan. He still carried bruises I didn't understand. He still disappeared sometimes, coming back with anger in his eyes and guilt on his hands. And though he let me closer than anyone else, I knew he was still holding something back. Something big enough to shatter us both. Ethan's kiss lingered on my lips for days after it happened, haunting me like a melody I couldn't forget. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the warmth of it, the trembling hesitation, the quiet desperation behind it. But just as quickly as it began, the walls started closing in again. Ethan was different after that night. Softer, sometimes, like he'd given himself permission to feel. Other times, more distant than ever, like he regretted letting me that close. I didn't know which version of him I'd find when I saw him next. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday night. I was at the diner, wiping down tables after a long shift, when I saw him pull into the parking lot. His car door slammed hard enough to make me flinch. He stormed inside, jaw tight, eyes blazing, shoulders coiled like a predator. "Ethan," I started, but he cut me off. "Let's go." Something in his voice made my stomach twist. I didn't argue. I grabbed my jacket, told my manager I was leaving, and followed him outside. The drive was silent, tense. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I could see fresh bruises blooming on his cheekbone. Finally, I asked, "What happened?" "Nothing you need to know about," he muttered. "Ethan, drop it, Liam." His tone was sharp, final, but I couldn't drop it. Not when the boy who had pulled me back from the edge now looked like he was standing on one himself. He drove us to the cliffs again, the same spot where we'd first sat together in uneasy silence. This time, though, the ocean felt angrier, the waves crashing against the rocks like they wanted to tear the world apart. Ethan got out of the car, lit a cigarette with shaky hands, and stared out at the water. You ever feel like no matter how far you run, the past is always right there, waiting to drag you back? He asked suddenly. I stepped closer, heart pounding. "Yeah, all the time." He looked at me then, and there was something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. "Ethan," I whispered, "what's going on?" He dropped the cigarette, grinding it under his boot. "You don't want to know." "I do. If you're hurting, I want to know. I need to know." He laughed bitterly. "You think you want the truth, but you don't, Liam. Once you see it, you can't unsee it." My chest ached. "Then show me. Because I don't care how dark it is, I am not going anywhere." For a moment, I thought he might finally open up. His lips parted. His shoulders trembled. But then he shook his head, climbed back into the car, and drove me home without another word. That night, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, his expression, the bruises on his face. Something was happening, something bigger than I understood. And the terrifying part was, I was already in too deep to walk away. The next few days were a blur of tension. Ethan avoided me, his texts short and distant, his presence almost ghost-like. When I did see him, he was distracted, restless, like he was carrying a weight too heavy to set down. And then came the night it all cracked open. I was walking home from the diner when I saw him across the street. He wasn't alone. 3 men stood with him. Older, rough-looking, their voices low and threatening. I ducked behind a parked car, my heart racing, straining to hear. "You owe us," one of them hissed. "And running around with some pretty little boy isn't going to change that." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I said I'd get the money." "You've been saying that for months." The man stepped closer, shoving him. "We're done waiting." Before I could stop myself, I called out, "Hey!" The men turned, their eyes narrowing. Ethan's face drained of color. "Liam," he snapped, his voice sharp with panic. "Go home." But I couldn't. Not when they looked ready to tear him apart. "Who's this?" One of them sneered. "Your boyfriend." Ethan moved faster than I'd ever seen him. He shoved me back, putting himself between me and them. His voice was deadly calm. "He's no one. Leave him out of this." The words cut deeper than I expected. No one. But before I could react, one of the men swung at Ethan. The fight erupted, brutal and fast. Ethan held his own, fists flying, but he was outnumbered. I tried to jump in, but one of them shoved me hard, sending me sprawling to the pavement. "Stay down," Ethan barked, blood on his lip, fury in his eyes. It was chaos shouts, fists, the sickening sound of bone hitting flesh. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the men pulled back. "This isn't over." One of them spat, pointing at Ethan. "You've got a week. After that, we collect." They disappeared into the night, leaving us broken on the sidewalk. I scrambled to my feet, rushing to his side. "Ethan, don't," he said, breathing hard, blood dripping from his nose. "Don't what?" Pretend I didn't just see that. His eyes burned into mine, filled with a pain so raw it nearly brought me to my knees. "You should have listened to me, Liam. You should have stayed away." That night was the beginning of the unraveling. I tried to get answers, begged him to tell me what was happening, but he shut down completely. The boy who once let me hold him through the storm now looked at me like I was another danger, another weakness he couldn't afford. But the more he pushed me away, the more determined I became. Because no matter what demons he was fighting, I wasn't going to let him fight them alone. I found him 2 nights later at the cliffs again, staring at the ocean like it held the answers to everything. "You're not going to scare me off," I said, stepping beside him. He didn't look at me. "You should be scared, Liam. You should be terrified." "I'm scared," I admitted. "But not of you. Of losing you." His shoulders shook, and for a moment, I thought he might break. Instead, he turned to me, his face twisted with anguish. "You don't understand. If you stay close to me, they'll use you against me. They'll hurt you. And I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't watch that happen." I reached for his hand, ignoring the way he tried to pull away. "Then let me in. Let me fight with you. Stop trying to do this alone." For the first time, he didn't argue. He just stood there, trembling, his hand finally gripping mine like it was the only thing keeping him upright. And in that fragile silence, I knew the truth. Whatever darkness Ethan Callahan was running from, it was about to swallow us both. The following week was a nightmare. Ethan didn't speak to me unless absolutely necessary. And when he did, it was sharp, clipped, like he was trying to convince me I didn't matter. Every day, I imagined those men closing in again. Imagined the pain in his eyes if they hurt me in retaliation. Couldn't stand it. Finally, I made a decision. I wasn't letting him fight alone anymore. I went to the diner after my shift and found him leaning against his car, waiting, cigarettes in hand. Eyes tired and stormy. "You're insane," he muttered as I climbed in beside him. "Maybe," I said. "But I'm not leaving you." He was quiet for a long time, hands tightening on the wheel. Then he finally said, "You don't know what you're signing up for, Liam. This isn't high school drama. This is life and death." "I don't care," I said, voice firm. "I don't care if it kills me. I'm not leaving you." That was the moment I realized something terrifying. Ethan didn't just want me close. He needed me close. And somehow, despite the danger, I wanted to be there for him, more than I'd ever wanted anything before. The first night of our plan to confront his past started with a tip from someone in the shadows. A friend or enemy who knew where those men were hiding. Ethan refused to tell me the full story, the reasons, the debts, or the threats. But I didn't need to know every detail. I knew I had to stay by his side. We drove for hours to a warehouse at the edge of the city. Rain-slicked streets blurred the neon reflections, and I sat silently beside him, gripping the edge of the seat as if I could hold the storm at bay. When we arrived, Ethan's body went rigid. "Stay here," he whispered. "No," I said, looking into his stormy eyes. "I'm not leaving you." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Then, finally, gave in. "Fine," he muttered. "But stay behind me. And whatever you do, don't get in the way unless I tell you." The warehouse reeked of oil and sweat, shadows stretching across the high ceilings. The three men were there, waiting, their faces unreadable in the dim light. "Ethan Callahan," one of them said, stepping forward. "We've been expecting you." I could see the tension in Ethan's jaw, the way his fists clenched. But instead of running, he stepped forward, standing tall, unflinching. "You're not taking anything from me," he said, voice low and dangerous. The fight erupted immediately. Ethan moved like lightning, fists and feet striking with precision. I stayed back, watching, my heart in my throat, terrified but unable to look away. One of the men lunged at me, and I stumbled, barely managing to stay on my feet. Ethan spun, grabbing the man's arm and twisting it behind his back. The strength and determination in his movements mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. "You okay?" he hissed over the noise of the fight. "Yeah," I said, voice shaking. "I'm fine. Just don't die." For a brief second, his eyes softened. "I won't. Not if you're here." When it was over, the men lay groaning on the floor, retreating eventually when they realized they were outmatched. Ethan leaned against a crate, bruised but alive, breathing hard. I ran to him, grabbing his arms, inspecting the cuts and scrapes. "You're insane," I whispered, panic threading through every word. He laughed, a little, bitter but soft. "Yeah, maybe." Pulled him into me, holding him tight. "Don't ever scare me like that again." "I won't," he muttered, resting his forehead against mine. "Not if you don't leave me." And I didn't. After that night, something shifted. The threat from the men didn't vanish. But Ethan began to trust me more. He started letting me in on small pieces of his past, the debts, the fights, the fear. Each revelation was a dagger to my heart. But I never faltered. I was there, holding him together when he couldn't do it alone. One rainy evening, we were at his apartment, the city lights glowing dimly through the window. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring at nothing, and I sat beside him, hand brushing against his. "Do you ever feel normal?" I asked softly. "Normal?" He laughed bitterly. "What's that?" "Not afraid. Not broken. Just you." He didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, he leaned into me, resting his head on my shoulder. I think I'd like to be normal. With you. My chest tightened at the words. We'll figure it out. Together. And for the first time, I believed it. But healing was messy. Arguments flared. Tempers rose. Fear and anger blending into nights of silence. Yet each fight ended the same way, with one of us reaching for the other. Needing to prove that despite the chaos, despite the scars, we were still there. And slowly, painfully, we began to understand each other. Ethan began to see that I wasn't going anywhere. I began to see that his walls were not meant to shut me out, but to protect me from the darkness he carried. The night I finally understood the depth of his secrets came with a phone call. Ethan, I said, tense. What's happening? I have to deal with something. He whispered, voice breaking. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. Just stay out of it. But I knew better. The men from before had returned, threatening more than just his life. They had leverage. Something from his past he thought I didn't need to know. And now, knowing didn't feel like a choice, it felt like a responsibility. I'm not leaving you, I said, my voice steady. No matter what. And for the first time, Ethan let me see his fear raw, unguarded, almost unbearable. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Then, we face it together. That night, we faced the darkness side by side. The men came again, but this time we were ready. Together, we fought. Every punch, every movement synchronized as if we'd been doing it our whole lives. And though the night left bruises, cuts, and aches, it also left something stronger: trust, love, and an unspoken promise that no matter what came next, we would face it together. When the dust settled, Ethan pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine, trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. You stayed, he whispered. I told you I wouldn't leave, I said, voice firm. His lips brushed mine softly, almost shyly. I didn't think anyone could love me through this. You don't have to think, I said, smiling through my tears. You just have to let me. For the first time, Ethan smiled without shadows lurking behind it. For the first time, we let ourselves just be broken boys finding solace, safety, and love in each other. The first sunrise after the final fight felt unreal. Ethan and I sat together on the roof of my apartment building, the city below us slowly waking to the light of morning. He was quiet, leaning against me, and I let him. For once, there was no chaos, no threat, no weight pressing down. Just the soft warmth of his body against mine. Steady breathing. The faint sound of the wind rustling through the antennae and wires scattered across the rooftop. I realized in that moment that we had survived. Not just the fight, but the storm inside each of us. You look exhausted, I murmured, brushing damp strands of hair from his forehead. He didn't move, just let out a low laugh. Yeah. And you look like hell too, pretty boy. I rolled my eyes, smiling despite the dark circles under my eyes. I think I can forgive you. His lips brushed mine briefly, a gentle confirmation that no words were needed. We had been through hell, yet here we were, still standing, still together. The weeks that followed were a fragile kind of happiness. Ethan began going to therapy sessions, not that he admitted it willingly at first, but I could see the difference in him. He was softer, calmer, willing to trust more, willing to let me in fully. The walls weren't gone, but they were no longer impenetrable. I stayed by his side, of course, learning how to navigate the boy I had fallen in love with, the boy who could be fire and ice one moment, fragile and tender the next. Our nights were spent talking for hours about everything and nothing. Our mornings were quiet, often shared with coffee and pancakes, laughing over little mistakes, teasing, falling into comfort that neither of us thought we'd ever have. One rainy afternoon, I found him at the diner again. Only this time, he wasn't leaning against his car with a cigarette. He was smiling genuine, unguarded and waving at me from across the street. I ran to him, and he caught me in a tight embrace, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I missed you," he murmured. "I missed you too," I said, laughing despite the lump in my throat. And just like that, the tension of the past months seemed to melt away, replaced with a warmth I never wanted to leave. Ethan had changed, but not entirely. He was still bold, still reckless in small ways. But now there was patience, there was care, and most importantly, there was love. He loved me, fiercely and openly, and I loved him just as fiercely, knowing that love wasn't perfect but it was ours. We began planning our future, not just the day-to-day survival, but real plans, trips, small adventures, even conversations about moving together someday. The dream felt huge, improbable, yet exhilarating because we had already survived so much. One evening, we were lying on my bedroom floor, rain tapping gently against the windows, when Ethan turned to me. "Do you think we'll ever be completely normal?" I smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from his face. "Maybe not, but we'll be happy, and that's close enough." He grinned, the first full smile I had seen in months. "Close enough is perfect with you." We kissed then, slowly, deeply, letting go of all the fear, all the pain, all the uncertainty that had haunted us. It was a kiss that sealed the promise we had already made countless times with our hands, our words, our hearts, that no matter the darkness, we would always find each other. The world outside still held dangers, still held memories of what had almost destroyed us. But it no longer mattered, because we had each other, and that was more than enough. Our first quiet morning together was like waking from a long nightmare. Ethan made coffee, burned the toast slightly, and laughed when I scolded him. I rested my head on his shoulder, inhaling the scent of his cologne mixed with the faint smoke from his old cigarettes. Now almost gone from his routine, he had never been so soft, so open, so entirely present. I realized then, fully, that the boy I had once believed would drag me into chaos had become my anchor. He wasn't the savior I imagined, nor was he the hero of some fairy tale. He was better, messy, real, human, and he loved me in all the ways I needed most. Over the next months, we built a life together slowly, carefully. We had small arguments, tears, and misunderstandings, but always ended up wrapped in each other's arms, forgiving, learning, and loving harder. We moved past fear and uncertainty into a delicate, fragile, and beautiful kind of peace. And every time I looked at Ethan, I saw the boy I had first met at the bridge, the storm, the danger, the thrill, but also the boy who had let me see his heart, who had let me in, who had chosen to stay. Our love wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was ours. And as we stood together one evening on the rooftop, watching the sun dip below the city skyline, hand in hand, I finally understood something I had been denying for far too long. Ethan Callahan wasn't my hero. He wasn't my savior. He was so much better than that. He was my home. We kissed again as the sun vanished, the city lights flickering on below us, our hearts beating together in sync. And in that perfect, fleeting moment, I realized that sometimes the greatest hero isn't the one who saves you from darkness, it's the one who chooses to stay when everything else falls apart. And Ethan had stayed. Forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.